feel a little selfish. I get to be in the middle, like receiving all this. It's just like, it's all good. So Iowa decided it's going to be fall. Finally, yeah. I'm still harvesting tomatoes, practically at Halloween. So what? Climate change. Fall is my favorite season, especially now that I've moved back to the Midwest where we actually have fall. Because I like to say in Texas, we don't have fall, we just have drop. So coming back and getting a chance to actually watch the earth change in this way, especially for an earth-centered spirituality person like myself, is just magical. I never get tired of it. I love watching the squirrels get fatter. I've been watching my cats put on their winter coat inside the house, which is sort of interesting. Like I looked down at Professor Willoughby and I was like, you're twice the size. How much are we feeding you? And then I picked him up and I'm like, that's all hair. We're getting ready. And this is this in-between time. You know, Dana actually mentioned the wheel of the year, how it turns and how there's a veil between this world and what's next. And in my contemporary pagan tradition, this is actually our new year. Our calendar is based at least loosely on the agrarian cycles of Western and Northern Europe, which again, living in Texas was pretty weird to do winter solstice in my shorts. It was 81 degrees and we're like, okay. But in an ideal world, you know, we flow with the planet. And so we are approaching the last turn of the wheel in the fall. We actually celebrate 3 harvest festivals, which begins in August with Lammas or Lunasa, which is the harvest of the first fruits, and then the fall equinox, which in some traditions is called Mabon, which is actually from Welsh tradition, which is the harvest of grains. And now we're at the 3rd harvest of Samhain, which in a world where you butcher your own meat, that's what we're doing. And so many of our neighbors probably are doing that. But it is sort of the last things that come in before winter settles in. But it is this time that's between. It is a time that's, you know, we're passing out of the old year, but we're not in the new year yet. It is a time that British social anthropologist Victor Turner, who is one of my intellectual ancestors, declared a time betwixt and between, and he drew on the concept of another British social anthropologist who is one of my uneasy ancestors. There's not going to be a quiz, y'all. A guy named Arnold van Gennep, who said that these spaces are liminal spaces. They are spaces that are between. The word limen is actually Latin, and it means threshold. So when we are on a threshold, we are not in one place and we are not in another. And this time of year is that threshold where we have time to look back and we have time to look forward. And it is a time to remember, to gather in, and to also think about what sustains us through the winter, which again was pretty weird when it was 81 degrees on winter solstice, but hits a little closer to home now that I am here. So we are at this time, if you're looking around, the harvests are coming in, the animals are putting on their heavy coats, but it is a time between. I was looking out at my garden this morning and like half of it's dead and half of it is producing tomatoes and marigolds and peppers like their lives depend on it, because it does. And so I was looking at that sort of over this week and watching my garden bed in these kind of different stages and thinking like, that's what Samhain is. It's a place where we know, at least in our tradition, my tradition, we believe that life and death are not really separate, that it's all part of the same complex, sacred whole. And that there is always life in the middle of death, there is always death in the middle of life, and they are necessary. Because as with our leaves, with our children, the idea that things die to feed what comes next, and that we will in turn do that, whatever we think happens after, because nobody knows. We do know that whatever happens to us spiritually after we die, we know that we live on in what we give back to the earth, and we live on in the people that descend from us. And those can either be our genetic descendants, They can be our family of choice, or our family of circumstance, depending on how you look at it. And they can be our intellectual and spiritual ancestors. They all take part in creating who we are. The other thing that I love about liminal times is they're a time when the regular rules don't apply. So most people, especially if you grew up Catholic, can think about Mardi Gras or Carnival, right? Which is a liminal time. It's a time between sort of the regular year and Easter. And if anybody has partaken in those celebrations, the rules don't apply. But at Samhain, rules also don't apply. It is in Samhain traditions that at least parts of our modern holiday of Halloween comes about. And it was a way scarier and more raucous holiday before the 50s when capitalism got a hold of it. These are the same people that made Christmas so raucous that Cromwell banned it. So but it's recognized not just in sort of pagan tradition and Northern European tradition. This is a time when throughout Central America, Dia de los Muertos is happening, and the idea that we can be very close to our dead happens. All Saints' Day and All Souls' Night are sort of vestiges of Samhain in Christian Europe. The idea that the regular rules of physics, they just don't work. We can pass into the world of the dead, and if we're lucky, we can come back. And the dead can pass easily into our world. It is also the only time of the year where your parents, who told you, don't ever take candy from a stranger, not only encourage you to take candy from strangers, they encourage you to go knock on their doors and ask them for candy. Let's think about it, right? The rules don't apply, and we sort of know that at a basic level. This is a time where we can dress up, and on Halloween you can be anything you want to be, which some say that tradition comes from if your ancestors are walking among you and they recognize you and realize that they miss you, they're going to want to take you back. So we want to be able to recognize them and maybe not be recognized in turn. Gestures vaguely at everything. Sometimes I'm just like, Bog Mummy, take the wheel, take me. Take me wherever we're going to go. But it's a time when that veil, Dana talked about the veil, it's very thin, and it changes the balance of things and how we understand the world to work. And in Unitarian Universalist tradition and in my tradition as a pagan, we know that we're part of this complex and sacred and interconnected whole. In fact, it's one of our jet pig values. And part of the way, at least I experience that interdependence, is believing that all the world is connected, and that includes those that have gone before. My jury is out on what actually happens after death. I'm open-minded about it, but I do know that there are parts of the people that have been important to me that stay with me, and this time of the year, I feel like I'm just a breath away from people. Like they're always there. On our altar back here, I have several things, but one of the things I have is there's a little purple stone that's got my best friend's ashes in it. And one of the things that we often said to each other, because she had health problems and we knew that I would outlive her, is she said, she's like, when I go, I'm just always in the next room. And so when I think about her and the last couple of days, like she really is just in the next room. And this time of year, this liminal spot, this threshold before we get on with the business of living, gives us a time to think about the people that we've loved and lost, whether it's this year, whether it's long ago. And I use the word people very, very loosely. They can be human beings that we have known and loved. They can be human beings whose work inspired us, although they were dead long before we came along. They can be our pets and our domestic animals. They can be any place where we have interacted and found inspiration. So I was thinking this morning about, during the pandemic, my niece, who was born when I was in high school, she's in her 30s, so I always say that because people are like, your niece, is she like 6? She sounds deep. No, she's in her 30s, and she's a photographer. And she lives in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And during the first parts of the COVID lockdown, she hiked several hundred miles because she didn't know what else to do. The art museum at which she is a curator was not open. And there was a day where she sent me pictures, and Stephanie my wife probably remembers this because she was like, only you two. And she sent a picture and she said, does this look like a mountain lion kill to you? And I looked, and it was most of what was probably once a deer. And I was like, yeah, the head's gone, so it's mountain lion kill. Like, are you out there? And over the next, it was on her favorite hike up Old Baldy in the Black Hills. And over the next few weeks, she hiked there every day, and she documented in pictures as the doe went back into the earth. And we talked about how beautiful that was, and how, like, only us, right? And at last, after the scavengers and the bugs and everything else had done its business, and there was just bones left, she took the last picture and she said, is there anything you want? And I was like, well, I don't know. I said, but you ask the doe. You ask her. And if there's something I am supposed to have from her, then you bring it, but you leave an offering. And she did. She brought me back a jawbone. And I think about that every time I see it in what I affectionately call my room of dead animal parts, which is where all my witchy stuff is, that in the midst of like all that horror, we could recognize the cycles of the earth, and that it can be beautiful if you are willing to see it that way, and not as a tragedy, but that the earth was just doing what she was doing. So having some time to think about all that's passed before, all that has made us who we are, for good or for ill, is something we do at Samhain. And I grew up in the Midwest. I spent a lot of time in Texas, but I grew up in the Midwest. And so one of the things that I know is that the best conversations happen at the kitchen table. The best conversations happen at the kitchen table. After everybody has done the dishes, and you're on like your third cup of coffee, and everybody's kind of off company manners, everybody's at home in the kitchen. That is something that I love about my house now, that people can gather in my kitchen. And so I like to think about, at Samhain, what we do is we invite our ancestors and our beloved dead to sit at the kitchen table with us, the place where you can really have a conversation. You can really talk. And for that reason, meals are really common at this time of year. So if you think about soul cakes that are put out for All Souls Night, think about if you've partaken in Dia de los Muertos, the tamales and the conchas and the pan de muerto. In my house, we have sometimes had what's called a silent supper, which is the table is set and foods that remind us of our beloved dead are placed on the table, and they're eaten in silence. And the idea is that in silence, our dead come and sit at the table with us, and we can talk to them. Some people go all out. They do the meal in reverse order and start with dessert. It's a beautiful tradition. And even when I have not been able to have people with me, I have kept this tradition when I can. I typically make my late mother's spaghetti and meatballs for Samhain supper. She was an Irish, French-Canadian girl that grew up in Brooklyn, New York, surrounded by Italians. So, so what I make is never quite as good as hers, but we get close. And of course, she didn't leave a recipe. So my siblings and I have been trying to duplicate this spaghetti sauce for 35 years and counting. My sister swears that it's just the right amount of cinnamon. My brother swears that the secret lies in dropping a spent sulfur match into the sauce, because every time my mother had to light that stove, she dropped at least one match into the sauce. So, I haven't figured it out yet. I don't know if I need another match. I don't know if I need more cinnamon. I don't know what it is. She would actually say it's because you can't get contadina tomato products in the Midwest, and everything is just isn't as good. But yeah, it is the quest. I will probably be trying this again Friday night. And when I think about the cinnamon, too, every time I put the cinnamon in the sauce, I think about, especially because it's pumpkin spice latte season, right? That's the other thing I love about fall, pumpkin spice latte. Although a friend of mine in Dallas posted pictures of themselves eating pumpkin spice ramen today, and I can't get behind it. But every time I put the cinnamon, I think about the fact that my My ancestors, the ancestors of lots of people in this room, basically conquered the world for spices. And then I refused to use any of them, which is super weird. But the things that make up pumpkin pie spice were at one point the most valuable things in the world. People fought wars. People killed each other over them. And now, like, I have it sprinkled on my coffee, right? And I think about, like, what they would say. And I think they would be like, yes, girl, yes. Some people say we're our ancestors' wildest dreams. Sometimes I wonder if I'm their worst nightmare. But the idea that we still have, like, passed down through us, what would our ancestors say, the things that they sort of fought for? What would, you know, and to make peace with the fact that some of our ancestors weren't great, right? But when we have a chance to have our dead close to us, we keep them alive, we speak their names, we remember their stories, their struggles, their gifts. You know, some people we knew and we love very deeply, and some people we will never know who they were, but their traces are in our bones and in the soil we walk on. We know that we have ancestors of blood, of spirit, the people that have taught us, who have made art that's moved us, activists and healers, and those who light lamps of freedom, who plant seeds of compassion and justice that we're still harvesting today. We know there's so much that had to come before us for us to be in this room. So let's take a moment and speak the names of our ancestors and our beloved dead, whether they're our ancestors of blood, spirit, of mind. Hi, Vic and Arthur, Vic and Arnold, so nice to see you. To invite them to our kitchen table. And you can welcome them silently or call their names out into the space. I welcome my mother, Betty, and my father, Russ, and my best friend, Mary, and my cats, Luna, and Osiris, and Ginger, and Bunny. Who else would we like to welcome to the space?
My sister, Marcia. Marcus.
Excellent. Thank you. They're all welcome, spoken or unspoken. So when you start talking about doing ancestor work, think about pumpkin spice for a minute. When you start talking about doing ancestor work, certainly, you know, when we read about these festivals and these traditions, we talk about our ancestors that, you know, we love and that shaped us, and, you know, the grandma who taught you to read or whatever. But that also brings up a really uncomfortable question, which is, what do you do if your ancestors kind of sucked? What do you do? Because we know that we have ancestors who did not live wisely or kindly. We know that some of them upheld systems of harm, and that those systems still shape our world. They may have been people that were enslavers. They may have been people that homesteaded and were, you know, complicit in the genocide of indigenous people, as mine were. And we also sometimes have ancestors in our lives who commit violences that are more personal and more intimate. So if we have abusers in our family, or racists in our family, or people who have otherwise committed harm, they're our ancestors too, so what do you do about that? And I always think about, there was this guy that sat next to me in chemistry when I was a senior in college. His name was Chris, and we were responsible for a whole lot of broken Pyrex. And he was on the drum line, which was the closest thing to being a celebrity you could be at the University of North Texas at the time, because the football team was terrible, but everybody showed up. And Chris was this, like, you know, like 400th generation Texan or whatever. And we got to be friends in the course of, like, suffering through chemistry and equations. And one morning he sat next to me in lecture, and he didn't look so good. And I was like, what's going on? And he said, well, you know, my grandfather died. And I was like, well, I'm really sorry. Like, I hope his memory is a blessing. And he's like, but that isn't the worst part. And I was like, all right. And we should have been listening to the lecture, but at this point we're not. And he said, so I went to help clean out my grandfather's house. And I was in their bedroom, and they have this large cedar chest. And I started pulling quilts and things out of it. And my grandmother rushed in, and she said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm moving things out of the cedar chest. And she said, you get out of there. You don't need to be in there. And he said, and that was the point at which I found my grandfather's clan robes. You found his clan robes. You found the sheets and the pointy hat. And they were way in the bottom, hadn't been touched forever. And he said, I asked my grandmother, like, what is this? And she said, you have to understand, we were from Pilot Point, Texas. Everybody was. Everybody was. And Chris said, but I know there's a very famous lynching on the bridge in Pilot Point. And I know my grandfather had to have been there. What do I do with this? What do you do with the fact that your granddaddy was in the Klan? Like, how do you even hold that, right? What do we do with the fact that some of our ancestors were just not great people? Whether it's as far back as the people that colonized the world for pumpkin spice, or as intimate as somebody who was committing racial violence as at least as recently as the 1970s in North Texas, right? What do we do with that? Well, in some ways the answer is to just not claim them. They don't count. We cut them out. They don't exist. But I'd like to offer us a different path, actually. I think that in accordance with our Unitarian Universalist values of transformation, of keeping love at the center, there's a different way we can deal with this. And the first thing we have to do is be very, very brave and be courageous and name the truth. We have to face it, we have to repair what can be repaired, and then we have to commit to doing better. And committing to doing better is an act of remembrance. We don't romanticize the past, but we do try to redeem its lessons through our choices. We can choose to move through the world differently and say explicitly that the world that they left for us is not the world we want to live in and not the one that we want to leave to our descendants. We can choose to be good ancestors. And in choosing to be good ancestors, and this is important, this is not something we do out of guilt or shame. We don't do it out of guilt or shame. We do it out of love. It is very easy. I hear people say, I feel so guilty because I was in the South for 20 years. I talked to a lot of people who had family that was as far back as the Civil War, and they say, I feel so guilty that my ancestors owned people. And I think one thing that's key is that's not guilt, that's shame. Guilt is feeling bad about something you did. Shame is feeling bad about something you are. And neither of them have a place if we're trying to be good ancestors. We have to be able to move forward and keep love at the center, which is not an excuse or a romanticization of what people have done, but a recognition that, quite honestly, it is what it is. It shaped the world that we live in, and we have the ability to shape it differently. Being a good ancestor also isn't about being perfect. We are going to mess this up. It's something that we do, but it's about consciousness. And it's about noticing the way that we live and how it ripples forward. It's about, I like to say, like as a pagan and a witch, my superpower is that I know how to pay exquisite attention. Exquisite attention. And we pay exquisite attention. We notice the way we move through the world and the way that we behave towards each other and with each other. We're living the truth that we're in covenant with each other. And when we choose compassion, when we center love, when we center equity, this all sounds familiar, when we work for transformation, when we work for justice, when we practice generosity, and when we hold space for people who are in pain, that's ancestor work. It may not be working in the way we think of with our ancestors who have passed, but it is being a good ancestor for what comes next. To be an ancestor, a good ancestor, is to be held accountable and to hold accountable. We cannot undo what's been done, but we can choose to repair. And that means we face the harms, large and small, that our forebears and ourselves have committed. That to know that we can choose to build the kinds of communities our ancestors could not yet imagine. That we can be the continuation of their dreaming, but maybe that dream should be lucid and we can change the direction that it goes. We keep love at the center, and that's love for this beautiful, fragile planet, for everyone who will breathe the air we leave behind, so we should try to leave it a little cleaner. Love for the children of every species who deserve to inherit a world that's alive and full of possibilities. To be a good ancestor is not only to honor the past, it is to shape the future. And so I offer these questions to you, and I'd love it if you want to talk back to me. What kind of world do we want to live in? Just, clean. us? What kind of world do we want to live in? Diverse. Organized well. Loving. Empathetic. Respectful. What kind of world do we want to leave for those who come after us? All these beautiful words that we've said.
Woke.
Woke. Yeah. Love it. Moving towards something better. Just. Hopeful. Inclusive. Loving. Sustainable. Regenerated. Diverse. Fun. Yes, thank you. I want to have a world of joy. I want to have a world of joy, the 1,000 tiny rebellions that we engage in when we're joyful. What kind of ancestors do we want to be? Kind. Considerate. Helpful. Loving. Courageous. Inspiring. I love that. As things so often happen with synchronicity, because that's how things happen in your life when you're looking for them, I guess. As I was about to get up, I had a little notification that says, you have a new Instagram post. And so I looked, and it was from a poet who I follow on Instagram, but I hadn't seen anything new from them in a while. And the post today, it made me think about how we deal with those ancestors who are not so great. If we want to create a world, the world that we've spoken, a loving, diverse, compassionate, just world. And the verse said, I forgive you because I was raised on hope. I forgive you because I was raised on hope. And I think that is the thing that is so key if we are going to come to terms with everything that's happened to bring us to this place and to move forward, is that we have to be raised on hope. And we take small actions of hope. We plant and tend our gardens, and we plant for pollinators. We work to live in right relationship and to repair bonds when they're broken. We listen deeply to those around us. We mentor our youth, and we let them teach us in return. We stand in solidarity with those who are oppressed by systems, even if we don't feel the same weight on our bodies and spirits. It doesn't have to happen to us for it to matter to us. We work to repair historic and contemporary wrongs. We loudly declare no to injustice, and we declare just as loudly yes to love. And we can choose to be radically wholly present. We can choose to be good ancestors. We can choose to make good trouble. We can choose to leave the planet and her children better than we found them. We are ancestors in the making. And we live with the knowledge that we are ancestors in the making as both a beautiful blessing and a profound and sacred responsibility. And so may our choices today and always honor the sacred web that connects us through time. May we choose widely and wisely. May we make them proud. May we gather at the table.